We've had the debates, and now people across the country are mulling over what they mean, what the election means for them. Hello and welcome to the Full Comment Podcast. I'm Brian Lilly, your host, and as Canadians sit down over Passover dinners, over Easter dinners, just relaxing with family over the holiday weekend, there's bound to be a lot of election talk, but will it move the needle? Speaking with Daryl Bricker, the head of Ipsos polling earlier in the week, he said we should know by Wednesday whether this is going to change anything. But let's break down the debate with the two people behind the Political Hack newsletter. You can subscribe to it at National Post. Stuart Thompson is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for National Post, Tash Kierden, columnist, and both of you quick takes on the debate on, you can go with either one, but the English debate is the one that matters more to our audience, and it is the most recent. Tasha, hot take, go.
So I thought the debate was a draw between the two frontrunners. And the reason is that both of them spoke to their base, their voters. I don't think they convinced necessarily anyone. I thought it was more a confirmation of their ability, either of them, to be prime minister and to answer to the concerns of their particular voter base. So I don't think it will change anything, but it may motivate people to get out there and vote so that they get their base out.
Stuart?
I think if I was scoring it, I would say that Pierre Poilievre probably won, not by like a landslide or anything, but if you were Pierre Poilievre and you had your idea of what you had to go out there and do, I think he basically accomplished that. Carney almost did. I think he was like in probably a harder spot than Poilievre because everybody was coming for him, and I think he's new and he was immediately irritable by the tone of the debate. And I think that was probably the only black mark for Carney, is that his demeanor wasn't great, but he didn't have any huge screw-ups.
So the way I looked at it, and put this in my column in the Toronto Sun, is that you had two very different visions on offer, and it speaks to what I know Tasha has been talking about, and that is the two different Canadas. And so you had Pierre Poilievre offering hope and change, almost sounding Barack Obama-like from 2008. He's talking about hope for a better Canada. Mark Carney was talking about safety, security, fear of Donald Trump. And if you look at that Leger poll that they did for us at Post Media that we released during the week, what did it show? Two main motivators in this election: hope for a better future for Canada. People who were voting on that, 76% are going with the Conservatives, and fear of the future for Canada based on Donald Trump. 60% of people voting on that are going to Mark Carney. I would say that the only one that may move the needle, and it would be a slow move depending on how the long weekend goes, is Poilievre. We'll have to wait and see if it happens. I think Carney held his own, held his base, but Poilievre, with that hope and change message, may have been able to make people give him a second thought as they're looking at the end results.
So, Brian, I both agree and disagree with you. I think that what, to me, this debate did was show that we have two candidates. We have two voter bases. We're both looking for, like you said, different things. One's looking for hope, one's looking for fear. The voter base that's looking for hope is younger. It is at the bottom of the socioeconomic scale. Or it's tradespeople, people who are being affected by some of the downturn, but who are also getting from Poilievre's messages that he wants to appeal to their issues, training and, getting a house and all these things. They don't have something yet to protect. They hope they eventually do. Whereas Carney's audience, and you could tell this even just the way he spoke. I mean, he's yards ahead of everyone else on that stage when it comes to business language, understanding how international mechanisms work. I mean, it was just very clear. And he used language that was complex in some cases. I didn't even understand all of it. I had to look up some things after because, his audience, though, he's speaking to people who would appreciate that. And those people are older. They're over 55. They are maybe retired, on the verge of being retired. There are a lot of women in there who look to this and they're scared for the future, and they hope that he can protect them, give them security from the menace that is Donald Trump and economic, upheaval. So I think both of them, in that sense, I felt both of them just consolidated their vote. But what it really tells me is that we're in a situation a lot like America, where they have a two-party system. We don't. But we have two parties and two polarities that are now dominating. And I think whoever gets elected, the other side is really not going to be happy.
So part of why I say I think that Poilievre's the only one that could potentially move the needle, and I think Carney did play the right defense and may not have lost any. But the reason I think that Poilievre may be able to gain ground is not just based on intuition and how I feel at the end of it, but on the polling. And so I'll throw this out to you and get your reaction, Stuart, and then Tasha jump in after, if you may, and then I'll hand back. First thing, polling done prior. Sorry, we're all doing little Mark Carney imitations of his
3 points.
Weird way.
3 points.
Polling done before the debate, both Abacus and Ipsos had similar numbers, and it was low 40s expected Mark Carney to win the debate. And it was about 29-30% thought Pierre Poilievre would. A flash poll done by Abacus at the end asked the question, which leader did the most to win your vote? And it was 43% said Pierre Poilievre, 40% said Carney. When it was Carney scored best with those who only watched a very little bit of the debate, and Pierre Poilievre scored 47% among those who watched the whole thing to Carney's 37%. Now, we'll have to see how it plays out. Clips on social media, clips on TV, what your aunt or uncle tells you about over some ham or lamb this weekend. What are your thoughts? Does either one of them have the potential? And then, of course, 57% of NDP voters say they're willing to change their mind at the last minute. What does it mean for movement over the next few days, Stuart?
Yeah, those are the two big variables that I'm paying attention to, which is Pierre Poilievre's repeated attack last night was, you are the Liberal government. You're not Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau. You are the Liberal government. And the people's perspectives on the Liberal government changed in the last 3 months, and it was kind of a reset button for Carney. And I think the best hope that Poilievre has is to say, look, it's all the same people. It's all the same policies. They put a new face on it, and it's going to be the same stuff. And if he can sell that message, I think he's got a great chance, because there is a little bit of a softness in those switchers. Those are conservative to liberal switchers that did that in the last 3 months when everything changed. The NDP vote is incredibly interesting also, because that poll you mentioned from Leger that we did this week, also big chunk of the population has their second choice as the NDP. It's about a quarter of people say that. And I think that shows you that there's some liberals still sympathetic, but they're parking their vote because of Trump. I just don't think that Jagmeet Singh did anything to win those people back this week. And if you are a conservative, you must be losing your damn mind watching Jagmeet Singh in that debate, because not only was he ineffective, but all of his attacks were against Poilievre, which maybe that makes sense because these lefty voters love a guy who attacks a conservative, but the interrupting, the kind of juvenile little comments here and there, I just can't imagine that. Well.
Mark Carney was hugging him. He was hugging Jagmeet tight. Don't be too tough on Jagmeet, because we want to keep their voters. It's 57% of NDP voters say that they're willing to change their mind. 31% of voters overall, though. I mean, this is part of why we're looking at a potential shift at the last moment, is almost a third of the electorate says, yeah, maybe I'll change my mind. So they're up for grabs.
Yeah, exactly. And, I was speaking to Dan Robertson about this. He was Aaron O'Toole's campaign manager, and he'll always tell you, look, that last week of the campaign, man, you got to be ready for those NDPers who get spooked by a conservative and they shift to the Liberals. And I think that that's something that normally does happen, but maybe that already happened. Maybe the spooked people have already been spooked and they've gone over, and that's kind of solidified. And then there is maybe a chance they'll go back if things change, or if the Trump stuff dies down, or Pierre Poilievre doesn't look quite as threatening as they thought he was a couple of months ago because he's being a little softer on the CBC or something like that. I think that so much of this could shift in the next week. And if I'm Pierre Poilievre, I'm looking at a lot of external factors that I can't control. The one thing that he can control, though, is his demeanor and his ability to tie Carney to that 10-year Liberal record.
So, Tasha, I have to ask you, I know you're, in that, what did you call yourself last week, older woman, leaning towards Mark Carney. But for years you were involved in conservative politics. And You look at the poll trackers, the aggregators. 338 Canada has the Conservatives at 38, 5 points behind the Liberals at 43. Same with CBC's poll tracker. The Toronto Star's poll tracker has it 42 for the Liberals, 40% for the Conservatives. 40%, not enough to even come close to a minority. How frustrating must that be for the Conservatives to be doing so well and not be able to grasp at power because the NDP has completely evaporated?
It must be incredibly frustrating, but they do bear some of the blame for that. And the reason is that for 2 years, they've been denigrating the NDP because it propped up the Liberals. And I get that made sense at the time. But at the end of the day, they should have thought strategically, is it good to suppress the NDP vote? Is that a smart move? No.
Well, they were taking some of it for a while.
They were, but I think that their calculation was that they would take that the rest of it would stay with the NDP, right? They would take the working class and the progressives would remain with the NDP. And that was a mistake because what they didn't think of this scenario where Trudeau was gone. They did not plan for that. It is quite clear because if they had, they would have realized that someone else will be in the chair. And then maybe those progressives will say, oh, we can go there now. So I just feel that this election now, the reason the NDP is low is, yes, the Trump threat, definitely. But there's also a bit of that conservative miscalculation. And I thought it was interesting how Singh kept attacking Poilievre constantly. And I was wondering, what is the strategy or why is he doing that? Why is he trying to destabilize Poilievre? Is just like anger, vindictiveness? What is this? Because I'm not sure you're going to get votes there. I think he was trying to get a rise out of Poilievre. I think he was trying to make Poilievre get angry and lose his mind on stage, have a moment that would, alienate voters in general and maybe alienate some of those voters that the Tories have taken from the NDP that they might come scurrying back. That didn't happen, though. But Singh came off as just, I found, totally unappealing, quite frankly, yesterday and desperate.
Okay, we've talked about conservative miscalculation. The Liberals, we can't even talk about calculations from them. This is just, pure luck in a lot of what's happened to them. But what do you think of Jagmeet Singh's miscalculation on taking down the Trudeau government while Justin Trudeau was still in office? I remember going over, he ripped up the agreement. I think we counted, 40 times or something that he said he ripped up the agreement back in September. I went to the event. I tried to get him twice. My colleagues from various media, from Radio-Canada, from the Globe and Mail, we all tried to get him to say he would vote non-confidence, and he wouldn't. He just kept saying he ripped up the agreement, and then Poilievre, rightly said, and then he taped it back up real quick. Do you think the NDP is or should be regretting their decision not to take down the Trudeau Liberals when they had a chance? If they'd done it last September, let's say, or October, or even December, they'd be facing a much different election right now, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, that is, if you're the Conservatives, obviously you've made some big mistakes, but at least you couldn't have brought down Trudeau by yourself. That was out of your hands. And if you're Singh, your fate was actually in your hands back then. You could have done this. You could have had some agency. And I think we were all, I'll admit, as a journalist, I didn't see any of this coming. We thought that maybe Trudeau would resign and it would change things a little bit. But the sea change, along with Donald Trump, I think surprised me. And I think a lot of people. But Jagmeet Singh, in that moment, we could have had a fall election. He could have been the progressive choice. They were a little bit.
They could have been the official opposition.
Yeah, I mean that was in their hands. They were broke at the time, and they probably were worried about an Ontario election that might sap some resources. But that kind of stuff, when you look at it now in hindsight, looks just piddly compared to what we're dealing with. So these are the moments. These are when you find out about someone's political instincts, right? Like this. When you make a decision like this, that tells us, I think, all we need to know. And I think Jagmeet Singh is going to pay the price with his political career.
Tasha, biggest blunder?
He'll have a pension because he so he's okay.
Yeah, so I'm the one that did the original story that calculated that because I kept seeing everyone make that claim online, and I thought, well, okay, is there anything to this? I doubt there is. And then the Canadian Taxpayers Federation will actually track every MP. They have the formula. They know what it is. They can do the calculation. And so I talked to them and I said, okay, what would it be for Jagmeet? And they said, well, about 30 grand in the first couple years once he hits 55, but then it goes up. And by the time he's 65, it's this much a year. And if he lives based on current estimates of how long he would an average man of his generation would live, it would be 2.2 million or whatever the thing was. And at that point I went, oh, I'd stick around an extra few months for 2.2 million down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's just self-interest. Who wouldn't?
Cynical though you are, Brian, I think you might be right. Honestly, I think that they made a series of miscalculations that have benefited the Liberals 100%. I mean, the wild card in all this, of course, was Donald Trump, and no one could really anticipate how big an effect it would have, because I think no one anticipated that Trump would do all the things he did. His first term really pales in comparison to this one in terms of the speed of actions, the number of sort of blitzkrieg of stuff. And that's what accounts for the fear that you mentioned, is that fear factor, because it's been so chaotic. And the markets have been chaotic and responded negatively to what he's doing. And there's no sign he's going to stop. So that's what no one predicted. So you can't really blame you can blame people for certain things, but I think for others, no one really predicted this.
Yeah, I mean, well, think back to November 5th through November 25th. November 25th was the first Truth Social post threatening Canada with 25% tariffs. There was a very different mood and vibe at Trump's reelection this time. And people were like, yeah, okay, well, he won, yeah. We've been here. We've survived this before. And November 25th changed all of that. And he continues to change things. He's been quiet the last little while. Do either one of you, I got asked this question a bunch this week. Katie Simpson from CBC asked if the president's mood had changed. And I think we'd all been wondering about that. Is he staying quiet on purpose? And she asked that question. But I had a lot of people immediately saying, there you go, that's CBC doing the Liberals' work once again.
Yeah, I'll stick up for Katie a little bit there, because in the same week, the National Post got together and we were like, what should we ask Poilievre this week? And we said, let's get defund the CBC back on the agenda. Let's see if he's moved a little bit on that, because Brian, he talked to you in December. Yeah. And he said, we're going to do it quick, buddy. Yep. And we were just wondering, we'd heard some stuff. The Star wrote a thing saying he'd taken it off the agenda, or at least backburnered it. And we were just curious, is this a 100-day initiative? Are you going to do this super quick? And so this is a power that journalists actually have, is that we were curious about this topic. We felt it was sort of it was an indicator if he was trying to moderate his views, or if he was worried about sort of centrist Canadians right now who might be turned off by that. And we put that question on the agenda. Sometimes we get to do that and we can choose what we ask about. So I think Katie's question was fair. It is.
Yeah, I mean, I think so as well. I was being asked nonstop, is this on purpose? It's like, well, we've all kind of noticed he's been quiet.
This kind of stuff, though, this is the media conspiracy narrative that also turns off the Carney voters and solidifies their vote. It's interesting. A lot of these sort of
Tasha, hold on. I am constantly accused. I'm constantly accused of being part of a media conspiracy by Carney voters.
You really? You too?
Yes.
Well, they don't like the what they consider the right wing media. Yes, they don't necessarily call it a conspiracy. They just don't like it. They think that there's, forces of darkness at work kind of thing. But people on the other side, who embrace a lot of conspiracy theories, the WEF, COVID vaccine conspiracy theories, there's a whole, Ukraine conspiracy theories. There's a whole host of conspiracy theories, and people in the same basket, they get the same algorithms and they are fed the same stuff. And that tinfoil hat stuff is what alienates a lot of the voters, the Carney voter base, who look at that and go, that's not my Canada. That's not me. I can't associate or relate to that, or in quotes, kind of those people. You know what I mean? There's actually a snobbery too, an element here, I think, and that came out in the debate as well to me, is that there's a sophistication of language and a sophistication that Carney embodies that people will call elitist. And that, Polyev doesn't even have to say he's an elitist. When you see him, he hangs out with elites, but he didn't come from elitist. That's the interesting thing, is that he wasn't Trudeau, who came from an elite background. He actually came from a very humble background. But people forget that because they look at him and say, well, he incarnates what we don't like. So this is why, again, I found this debate was revealed more almost about our electorate than about the two people. And I don't know if Polyev will move the needle with any of the so-called the Carney voter, sophisticated voter base, if you want to call them that, because they looked at him and his repetition of endlessly repeating his slogans during the debate. I mean, I found it off-putting. The lost liberal decade and all this, it feels childish. And it's not something that is appealing if you feel you want to be treated seriously as a voter. Honestly, I find it very off-putting. And I know other people do too. And they remark on it. They're like, why is he always talking and he's saying these same little tiny, 2-syllable words? Carney uses 3-syllable words, literally. So, again, polarity is set in our country. And the question is how we mend that, to me, is after this election. How do you mend that? Because one side's going to win, one side's not. And
I'm going out on a limb and saying that there's absolutely nothing Pierre Poilievre could do to win your vote over, though.
I think that what he could do, if he did had olive branch to what I would say are the more moderate conservatives, but it's clear that there's no interest in that. And that's what the debate too. I was looking to see, was he going to try and do a big tent in this debate, or was he going to motivate his base? He did not go big tent whatsoever. So again, it's a sense that you're not wanted on the voyage. And if you're not wanted on the voyage, why would you support someone who clearly is not interested or thinks that, you are part also of some elite conspiracy? Again, I think that is a deliberate choice they've made they thought win the election with 20%, because they had all these people who hated Trudeau along for the ride. Now they're gone, those people. And they don't hate Carney. They don't hate him the same way they hated Trudeau.
All right, let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll play some clips, get both of you to react to things that were directly said by the respective leaders, although not Jagmeet Singh, because you can only play so much of an interruption. Back in moments.
This is Tristan Hopper, the host of Canada Did What?, where we unpack the biggest, weirdest, and wildest political moments in Canadian history you thought you knew and tell you what really happened. Stick around at the end of the episode to hear a sample of one of our favorite episodes. If you don't want to stick around, make sure you subscribe to Canada Did What? Everywhere you get podcasts.
Well, as we're recording this, advance voting has already started, and I've been getting notices from Hamilton, St. Paul's in Toronto. Stuart, you were saying in Ottawa, big lines for advance voting. I don't know what that means in this election, though.
Can I offer a theory, Brian?
Sure.
So we did actually go this morning. I took my 8-year-old, my 4-year-old, and they told us it was nearly an hour wait, and we bailed immediately. So I have to go back. I haven't done my democratic duty. So there's two theories here. One is the enthusiasm one, which I think is the one I go to immediately. And then it's anyone's guess where that enthusiasm's going. The second one is, this is a holiday weekend. This is Easter weekend, and today is Good Friday. And we had heard they were having trouble getting poll workers. So this could just be they don't have enough people in these places, and the people in the line are being forced to pay for it.
Tasha, you have any quick thoughts on that?
Oh, it could also be it's a holiday weekend. People have time, right? So they're going on a Friday. Usually you would go after work, but these people go in the middle of the day because they can, because it's day off. I think I don't know about the poll shortage or poll staff shortage, but I do think that the conservative base in particular is very motivated. I think that is, and that's been the strategy too, is to get them out. And I think that they will get out because people who are motivated for change are more motivated than people who want a status quo by definition. And I do think the Liberal vote is a softer vote because people are not as committed to it. And Carney also wasn't working crowds for 2 years like Poilievre was doing. I mean, these people went to rallies, they drove, they clearly they care, they want to come, they're going to vote, right? So I think the conservative vote is more solid. So maybe those people are turning out. Maybe it's, the ridings you mentioned, St. Paul's was the switcher riding that went conservative less than a year ago with the by-election. That was a big surprise.
Mainly due to advanced polling?
Was it then? Okay.
Yeah, it was huge. It was huge in the by-election.
And that could be a factor after again, then it's maybe the same people. So I think it's a combination of things. But we'll know when everyone's cast their ballot, Brian. We have to wait.
Well, election day is a Monday. That's when we normally drop an episode. So we'll have to figure out something. Maybe we do a live, podcast episode on the Tuesday morning. So let's play some of the clips that happened. And interestingly, this past week, Pierre Poilievre went back to something he had announced before and made it a highlight in the middle of an election campaign. And at one point, you would have seen Liberals jump on this right away and attack because it involves the Charter of Rights. And Poilievre's campaign policy is he will use the notwithstanding clause to make sure that people like Alexandre Bissonnette, he's the example he keeps using, the guy behind the Quebec City mosque massacre, actually get consecutive sentences. Liberals have often used, anything that they see going against the Charter very strongly. And here's Poilievre talking about that during the debate Thursday night.
We will use it to protect the charter rights of law-abiding Canadians. I'm interested in the rights of victims. Mr. Carney seems to be very interested in the rights of criminals. He says that it's dangerous for me to ensure that mass murderers stay behind bars for life. You know what's dangerous? Turning them loose on our streets. I don't think you appreciate, sir, the chaos that is unfolding in communities. In Toronto right now, the police have been forced to tell people to just let the thief steal the car. When they break into the house, just take the keys. Just let them take the keys so that you don't get hurt. People are living in terror in many of our communities precisely because of the catch and release bail law, C-75, which requires judges release the accused at the earliest opportunity under the least onerous conditions. Every single member of your Liberal caucus and your Liberal cabinet voted in favor of this bill, and they're all determined to keep it in place despite constant promises to the contrary. Mr. Carney, Canadians deserve to live in peace and security. That is the right that I'm fighting for a change.
How did that play for both of you? Because Carney was not that strident on it. He had his own position, which is very different. But I thought Poilievre framing it as, I am using the Charter to uphold Charter rights, meaning Section 33, the notwithstanding clause is in the Charter, and he's looking to uphold the rights of victims. I felt like he neutralized that line of attack to a large degree. People who are never use the notwithstanding clause are going to be outraged, and a lot of voters who it's not their driving factor are going to say, I don't know. Thoughts?
Well, how many voters have an opinion on the notwithstanding clause? Probably very small percentage. And I will tell you, the one area that I am actually pretty well sourced in as a journalist is in small c conservative law nerd world. And I know for sure these guys have been gunning for this. That moment in last night's debate is what they've been thinking about for a couple of years now. They kind of let it out last year saying we're probably going to do this, notwithstanding clause, expect us to use it. And actually the freak out they were expecting from the kind of left of center law people and the media and the pundits, they were excited about that because what it would do is put the Liberals offside of that, and they have to kind of just defend this weird clause in the Constitution that probably people don't really know about. And then Poilievre gets to say, I just want to put mass murderers behind bars for life. That's what I'm trying to do here. The Supreme Court won't let me, so I'm going to use this clause and do that. And this is one of those issues that probably pulls 70-30 in Poilievre's side. And that was a moment, I think, it was probably his best moment of the whole night, was when he got to bring that hammer down.
And Tasha, you pay attention to Quebec politics more than Stuart and I, although I pay pretty good attention. But Blanchette has also been using Carney's view on the notwithstanding clause over some Quebec bills related to language and attacking him on that. And, what the Quebec government has done, I may oppose it, but it's very popular. So he's kind of in this weird position of, well, I'm going to oppose keeping mass murderers in jail longer. Well, why? And he's got to explain. And I'm going to oppose this language law. Well, why? We love it. Is that why he's less strident than I would have expected.
Well, yeah, it's like I don't know if you remember Vic Taves. Do you stand with us or with the child pornographers? Right. This was a famous line under Harper's government, where it was a question of bringing in tough laws on child pornography. And I can't remember. It didn't use the charter, but they were really, really harsh. And
I think that was Bill C-51, and I helped defeat it.
Did you? Okay.
Yes.
The idea, though, was if the opposition at the time, the Liberals, were going to say, no, we oppose this law. You're standing with the child pornographers. You're standing with people, and they considered it a freedom of speech issue. That's probably why you opposed it, because it was about art.
No, if you remember, they wrapped a whole bunch of stuff up into one bill. They made this omnibus bill, put all kinds of things in it, and yeah, it had stuff against child pornography, but it was everything else that folks like me were opposed to, and I was on TV at the time beating the crap out of them.
Okay, well, see, interesting. You did not take the bait of stand against because then you'll be a child pornographer, right? In this case, that's, to me, this is the equivalent of that today, is saying, well, if you oppose our idea, then you're standing with the mass murderers, and that obviously is not something where any Carney wants to stand. It's a wedge issue, but at the same time, the counter to that is to say, no. I didn't think he handled it properly. I would have said we have dangerous offender legislation in this country. You can be designated dangerous offender. And the reality is Andre Boulris, or whatever his name is, he's never getting out. He isn't. Everyone in Quebec that I was talking
Hold on. Bissonnette, I don't want to say that a sitting New Democrat MP was part of that massacre.
I'm really tired. I've been burning the midnight oil for 2 days, covering the debates, writing about the debates. It's anyway. My apologies. Yes. So Bissonnette is never getting out. He actually will not get out under the current system, even though he has this 25-year sentence, because there's the dangerous offender provisions. He is not going to ever get parole. He's never going to get out. So everyone in Quebec was saying this is a red herring, frankly, that Poilievre is using, but the rest of the country doesn't know. Whatever. The point is, Carney should have said that. He should have countered it. Someone in his team should have said, this is not necessary. No mass murder has ever been released in this country, ever. They have never gotten out early or ever. So this is not necessary. But
actually, there's been several. We've all pointed to several.
Define which mass murder has gotten out, Brian.
I
was still in there.
Go through my X feed.
Okay, fuck.
Myself, right. Chris Selly, Terry Newman.
Chris Selly is a call.
We've pointed to the cases. There's several cases, including Denny Lortie at the National Assembly years ago. So sticking with crime, though, Mark Carney wanted to say this week that you can't be tough on crime unless you're tough on guns. He went back to the well of the gun buyback program. Now, so after the Nova Scotia mass murder incident back in April 2020, on May 1st, 2020, they banned thousands of rifles and shotguns and said you can't use them and we're going to buy them back. Well, we're less than 2 weeks away from the 5th anniversary of that, and all those banned guns are still in people's gun safes. They've never been able to figure it out. If I were the Liberals, I would have just been quiet on this one, but they came back and they said, we're going to do it. Carney was asked about it, and here he is saying, well, we'll just do it better. Roll clip.
Mr. Carney, question for you. The Liberal gun buyback policy, not considered a success by many people. Reviving it is in your platform. Yeah. Why would it work this time?
Yeah, I think, well, what we've seen with that policy is some success at the commercial level, but not at the individual level, because it hasn't been, in my opinion, it hasn't been organized properly, and it needs to be organized properly. And instructed the Minister of National Security and Public Safety in order to do that.
I still would have stayed away from this and found another way to go with this issue. The Liberals always do very well playing on the gun issue. But this is one where they tried to get Canada Post involved and they said no. They asked the military, they said no. The RCMP has no resources to do this. And the provincial police forces like in Ontario and Quebec are just like, we're hands off. This is your baby and we're not touching it. Why'd they jump into that, Tasha? Why say we'll actually make the gun buyback program work 5 years after we announced it?
They have a candidate in Quebec who was one of the survivors of the massacre. They know in Quebec this is very, very, just the mention of guns is a very, very lightning rod type of issue, very divisive issue. And they are looking, they do want to keep the lead they have over the Bloc in Quebec. It is very important to the Liberals too, because if they're going to get a majority, there's two places they need those votes, and that is Quebec and the GTA. With some of BC thrown in, but really Quebec and the GTA. And so that is a big motivating factor. It worked actually against Aaron O'Toole in the 21 campaign as well. When the gun issue suddenly came out, the Liberals worked it, and they worked that angle. They worked it well in Quebec. So that to me is why they're bringing it out. They don't need to really fully explain anything. They just need to raise it. Guns, right? Guns bad. And Tories like guns is the implication. So I think that's their wedge issue, right? Abortion's a wedge issue for them. Guns are a wedge issue. They don't need to really go into details. They just raise them as specters, and they sort of zombie along, and people get scared.
Low information voters is what you're saying to me.
I think it's more a reflex emotional, yeah. And people don't do the digging, because again, elections are won a lot on emotion. People can bring out all the figures they want, but it's what you think that person is going to do about something, or what you are afraid of, or what you hope for. Those are the motivating factors. It's feelings as opposed to simply statistics.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to jump on one of my pet peeves, and this is the idea that everyone has to have a fully costed platform. The Liberals have said they will release one before the early voting ends, and everyone's going to have a fully costed platform. Perforate it and put it on a roll. It's not worth anything. Voting is an emotional reaction. It is not. People don't sit there and read the platforms and go, oh, well, I was going to vote for this party, but did you see this line item in their 43rd page? Oh, I mean, the math is off. I can't vote for them. Nobody does that. But we all have this charade of a fully costed platform, which as soon as they're elected, they never implement. Stuart, why do we hound parties to release these?
It's just journalistic muscle memory at this point, I think. But it's worth pointing out, Doug Ford didn't do that and has never been a big fan of that. And
3 elections in a row and he's won.
Yeah. And then you listen to his campaign manager and he's saying, this is not what people want from us anymore. And I think it is also correct to say that people weren't reading it. It really was just sort of a symbolic artifact of seriousness. Like, did this guy do a plan and do the math? And that's really all it is.
It started with Chrétien and the Red Book in '93, right? And it was a novel thing.
Yeah, I think actually, if the Conservatives had a different leader, there would have been a big discussion about not doing it. But Pierre Poilievre self-identifies as a policy wonk, and I think that's very close to his heart, is that he's a policy guy, and I think he couldn't bring himself to not do a costed platform. But I think in a normal world, maybe they would have thought, let's do what Doug Ford did.
Your thoughts, Tasha?
Carney's an economist, and so the thought is, okay, so they're going to bring. I think both campaigns assumed the other would bring out some numbers. So they decided they bring out some numbers at some point, but they're both dropping them. I think this long weekend when no one's going to really pay attention, and as Stuart pointed out, they're not going to be reading them afterwards anyway. It's the idea of a costed platform is somewhat appealing, or they think it's appealing. I think costed platforms went out in 2015 when Trudeau decided that you didn't need to balance the budget. So why cost anything, right? And people were like, yeah, it's okay. And ever since that, the NDP wanted to balance the budget. Mulcair wanted to balance the budget and he lost. And that spoke volumes. So of course, Doug Ford then's like, well, and pandemic, well, you never know what's going to happen. How can we put numbers on it? Well, okay, here we are in 2025 and people, I agree, don't care as much anymore.
Well, this last election for Doug Ford, it was, well, it's Donald Trump. You never know what's going to happen. Why put numbers on it? Let's talk about Mark Carney and numbers. Yves-Francois Blanchet talked a lot about Brookfield and Brookshield in the English debate. I had a good laugh at that. But there was a direct question to Mark Carney about closing tax loopholes. And the kind that Brookfield has benefited from may be legal, but a lot of people saying, is it right? Should they be closed? Here's Carney's answer.
Look, I think that what we need to do is undertake a comprehensive review of our corporate tax system and do that on the basis of the right principles. We've got to have fairness, transparency, sustainability, and competitiveness. So we need a tax system, a corporate tax system, including being part of a international minimum corporate tax through the OECD.
And what amazes me there, Stuart, is he spoke for about 45 seconds. He said a lot of words and he said nothing. He talked about, well, we need fairness, we need equality, we need sustainability. What does any of that mean? He just doesn't want to talk about this issue. I get it. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think also this might be a sign of his political inexperience, because I think he probably thinks about it in, the terms of the corporate guy at the boardroom who thinks it's probably fine. And I think that is something he's going to have to deal with. But, this is one of those things is I don't think it fully lands as a political attack. We kind of saw this with Donald Trump too, where I think most Americans, especially, but Canadians too, we both sort of secretly want to be rich enough to have an account in Bermuda. Like, I think that is something that I would love to have in my life, is an account that warrants that. And I think there's a little bit of that going on there. There's what I think he suffers from is that he just seems like the kind of guy who doesn't understand the normal person's problems, because he doesn't buy his own groceries. He's kind of in that stratosphere. He just happens to have lucked out that we're now in this election where that doesn't matter as much. The Trump thing has overshadowed all of that. Relatability is less of a concern. And it's just one more sort of lucky bounce for the Liberals this year.
It doesn't buy his own groceries. We haven't talked much about the French debate, Tasha, but before I get your thought on the Brookfield and the tax haven, there's a cute little moment in the French debate where they asked, what American products aren't you buying? And there were a couple of mentions of strawberries. There was crosstalk, so I thought Carney was one of them. But when I listened back, no, he had just said he's not buying wine anymore. But the NDP and the Bloc making mention of strawberries because Carney said, I don't buy my own groceries.
Yes, he was asked by French hosts in another French not debate program where what he's giving up, and the strawberries thing came up. They said, "Do you eat strawberries?" And he says, "Well, I don't buy my own groceries. So I'm prime minister." Like, he didn't say he never bought his own groceries, but he's prime minister. He said people do that now. Like, I can't go to the store, and he's right. You can't go to the store and buy it. But he should have had a better answer. He should have said, just pick something, right? And so he picked wine and alcohol. Again, wine and alcohol. So who's, that, he didn't just say alcohol, he said wine. He didn't say beer. He said beer. He said wine, right? So, again, not to stereotype, but his audience be like, yeah, I'm foregoing the Chardonnay from Napa Valley. I'm now getting stuff from Inniskillen or whatever. I mean, like, this is the thing. The answer he gave on Brookfield about how it's helping people in Canada, it's a success story. It's helping people with pensions because of the investment success it's had. Again, that speaks to the cohort of people who can relate to pensions, retirement, having things to protect. And that's his audience. So again, I think he thought he was convincing anyone on the other side that Brookfield is okay. Those people don't get that. They see him, they go, oh, elitist, and they just close their mind to it. So again, it's the two polarities. His voters, the question is whether they'll turn up. That's really, to me, what I'm going to be watching on election day. I mean, and in the lead up to the polls, are his voters going to show up in the same way that Poilievre's very committed voters are going to probably show up?
Well, I think hope and fear are two very strong motivators. So, I think both sides will show up. I guess it will depend on to the degree. As we've discussed the last week or so, there's now a bigger cohort of voters below 55 than above. Millennials now bigger than boomers. All of these things are unknown factors. Okay, last clip, and then we'll wrap up. In politics, you talk about sword and shield issues. Sword issues you attack with, shield issues you defend against. For the Conservatives, the environment is always a shield issue. For the Liberals, it's a sword issue. They love to attack. This clip of Pierre Poilievre talking about how we could lower global emissions more than what I think he said 2.5 to 3 times what Canada's total emissions are by exporting our LNG. I thought this was a very good shield moment for Poilievre to neutralize Carney's attempts. Carney's got great bona fides on environmental issues and climate change. Poilievre kind of neutralized some of that with this clip.
It lands within our priorities of bringing home jobs while bringing down emissions around the world. Look, the reality is that if we push production out of our country to more polluting countries, it actually makes the problem worse. But that has been exactly the Liberal approach with the anti-development law, C-69, blocking of 15 LNG export plants over the last 10 years. We have seen more of those jobs go abroad. I want to bring them home. My plan will be to approve, for example, natural gas liquefaction and export. If we sent our gas to India, for example, to displace half of their demand for electricity, we could reduce emissions by 2.5 billion tons, which is 3 times the total emissions of Canada. That's the way we bring emissions down and jobs up. It's common sense, and now it's time to bring it home.
All right. Tasha, was that something that, if you're a committed climate change voter, you're going green or you're going with Carney? But if it's I'm really worried about affordability, I'm worried about Trump a bit, and, I'm kind of, climate change matters to me, is that enough to neutralize it?
I don't necessarily think so. I know the sort of the exporter LNG, ethical oil arguments, the kinds of things that Canada produces energy that is either cleaner or more ethical than you get from the rest of the world. Places where there's no human rights or just dirty practices, and in terms of carbon footprint. I mean, I think that argument, I don't think with the really environmental crowd really holds water for other reasons, because they don't like Poilievre for other reasons that are stronger than that. And in this election,
well, I'm not talking about the environmental, where that's your main motivator. Like I said, if that's your main driver, you're not with Poilievre ever. But is it enough for the people where it's like, it's something I consider, but it's not my main driver?
I don't think it's driving anyone this election, to be honest with you, Brian. It is not a top 5 issue. I know he was trying to neutralize, mitigate, whatever. I think that right now, the environment that they devoted a whole segment to climate, I thought was ridiculous. It's not a factor in this election. It's not something people are thinking about. Right now, it's either bread and butter or it's Donald Trump. It's hope or fear, and the environment, for better or worse, is taking a back seat. And Carney keeps bringing it up. I don't get that strategy either, raising it. Like, I don't think he's going to pull the hyper progressive, green voter who hates elites, because there are those people too. They're still going to stay. There's some pure et dure who are going to stay with the NDP. He's not going to pull those people. And I don't think Poilievre, by showing the sort of Canada can be green in this way, and make money, and it's a great idea, and the Liberals it's their fault we're not doing it. I don't think that's going to convince people either. I just think, like I said, I think that chunk of the debate was a bit of a waste of space.
Stuart, what about you? I learned long ago that as soon when the environment is a top of mind issue, it's because everything else is going well. Talk to any pollster that's been in the game for a while; they will tell you that. So, was that a good move by Poilievre, or is it a wash, as Tasha says?
Yeah, well, I mean, he basically portrayed it as a pro-growth, pro-Canadian energy message, which I think is probably salient right now with Trump. And I totally agree on the climate change stuff. Like, I wrote about this a few weeks ago. Less than 1% of Canadians think it's their top issue. And even among people who care about it, the people who want to spend more than $100 a year to solve climate change is vanishingly small. So this is more of a make the fat cats pay for it and fix it kind of issue than it is Canadians are ready to take on any kind of burden. And I think that's what you saw with the carbon tax, is that if this comes down transparently on everyday Canadians, it's just not going to fly anymore. I think all the leaders understand that now.
All right. We shall see how things play out over the next couple of weeks. We'll see what polls start to shift Tuesday, Wednesday, and then that might tell us where we're headed to on the 28th. Thanks both very much for your time today. We'll chat again soon.
Thanks, Brian.
Full Comment is a post-media podcast. My name's Brian Lilly. This episode was produced by Andre Proulx. Theme music by Bryce Hall. Kevin Libin is the executive producer. Please remember to hit subscribe. Tell your friends about us. Leave us a review. Until next time, I'm Brian Lilly.
Here's that clip from Canada Did What? I promised you. Imagine yourself inside a Boeing 767 operated by Air Canada. It's July 1983, you're traveling between Montreal and Edmonton, and a couple hours into the flight, the comforting roar of its 2 jet engines suddenly stop, and most of the power cuts out.
Good evening. It was a metric mix-up. Air Canada has confirmed the plane that landed at Gimli, Manitoba last Saturday ran out of gas because of an error in metric conversion.
I regret to inform you that you're inside the Gimli glider, one of history's only incidents of a civilian airliner running out of gas in the middle of the sky. And this happened because someone didn't know how to properly measure out enough jet fuel. Now, I mention the Gimli glider only to note that systems of measure are not just numbers on a page. They're cultural objects. They might not be on par with language or religion, but they're ways of understanding the world around us. And if you screw with them, even with the best of intentions, you might get the occasional airliner falling out of the sky. Fortunately, in this instance, it miraculously worked out fine. The pilots in control of this particular Air Canada flight just happened to be 2 of the only people on Earth perfectly suited to safely bring down a crippled full-size airliner in the middle of Manitoba. One of them was an experienced glider pilot. The other one was a former Royal Canadian Air Force pilot who just happened to have served at a Manitoba airbase that was now directly underneath them.
If you want to hear the rest of the story, make sure you subscribe to Canada Did What everywhere you get your podcasts.